I think TCU pulls out a close one on Saturday night. I'll tell you why next. Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. I continue to apologize. I'm going to get better eventually, guys. I should, at least, hopefully. Whatever I had initially has turned into pneumonia now. So it's walking pneumonia. I'm okay. But if you hear, some sniffling, if my voice is kind of strange, sorry. I'm doing the best I can. UCF and TCU, Saturday night in Amon G. Carter Stadium. What are the keys to this football game? As we get closer to kickoff, the line for this game has been really interesting. It opened in most places, including at FanDuel, with TCU being 2-point favorites, which makes sense. The teams are pretty even. Now, I would argue TCU has a more impressive win over Stanford. And we'll see what Stanford does throughout the rest of the season, but I think that's a game that should age well. Just having to go on the road at the beginning of the year on a Friday night, find a way to win. I'm not saying you're going to hang your hat on that as like a resume builder, but it's a good victory. UCF has played New Hampshire and Sam Houston State. Both teams are undefeated. So, Vegas gives the home team the slight advantage. But as the week has gone on, the money has gone in UCF's direction. I think as of yesterday, they were 2-point favorites on FanDuel. When I checked just now, they're 1-point favorites. So it's basically a pick 'em ball game. When you're talking about a line that's, -1 for the Knights and +1 for TCU. And I understand why they got to that conclusion, and I think it's going to be a close football game. But I do believe, and as I've said all week, this is an exciting game because we're going to get answers about both teams. UCF has run the ball really, really well. TCU's thrown the ball well. And both teams have stayed, at least on offense, really in their comfort zone. The defenses that they've played have not forced them into uncomfortable situations very often yet. Both defenses are improved. They have new coordinators. And so maybe that'll be the difference in this ball game. But the keys for TCU, if they're going to come out with a victory on Saturday night, number one, you got to force KJ Jefferson to throw the football. And I understand he's a veteran QB. He's been around the block. But UCF has run the ball at will so far this season. 70% of their production on offense has been on the ground. RJ Harvey's having a really good year, 268 yards. KJ Jefferson has like 80 yards on the ground. Penny Boone has 135. Miles Montgomery has 128. They've got multiple backs. They've got the big quarterback. They've got a big offensive line. They want to run the football. And defensively, so far, TCU has been really good when teams have tried to just line up and run at them. They struggle with Ashton Daniels in Stanford and his ability to make plays off schedule. So I guess I'll kind of cheat here. I'll be a pastor that has, 3 sermon points, but I kind of have sub points within my points. And I'll say that one, TCU has to stop the run, but then within that, the subplot is you also have to find a way to keep KJ Jefferson in the pocket and not allow him to make plays off schedule, which means maintaining your rushing lanes, being disciplined. Paul Olawale is back this week. I would imagine he's going to have a limited snap count, but he will be available. Well, I guess I should say we assume, based on what Sonny said on Tuesday in the press conference. Haven't really heard anything different since. That he'd at least be available in some limited situations. This is a huge game for your defensive tackles. And I said yesterday, like your linebackers, especially a guy like Johnny Hodges, who is a really good old school linebacker. I was lucky enough to be on the Sons of UCF live show today, and I said I felt like Johnny Hodges should wear a neck roll. It just would fit who he is and his personality. Caleb Alarmzor, Namdio Bizor, they're going to have to swarm, read their keys well, swarm to the football, and make plays. It's going to be a big week for tackling, right? You got to find a way to get these guys on the ground and not allow them to just pop up and move around and, make plays after contact, make things happen after contact. Continue to move the chains. So put them in 3rd and long. And then when you do that, the hope is your corners, JT Broughton and Lamarian James, can get it done in one-on-one coverage. Now, UCF has had some success throwing the ball to Kobe Hudson, who has 165 yards on 7 receptions. But then past that, their leading pass catcher is Randy Pittman with 3 catches for 52 yards. Miles Montgomery has been involved. RJ Harvey's been a little bit involved too. They like to use running backs in the pass game. Gus Malzahn is familiar with Andy Avalos. Andy Avalos is familiar with him. And we're getting a first real test of this defense and what they can do. And so I'm ready to see, against an offense like this, can you withstand the physicality and make the adjustments you need to? And watching that tape, like this, I think this UCF O-line is pretty solid. But I will say, they're big, they're physical. They were just shoving guys off the line the last couple weeks with Sam Houston, New Hampshire. And what that allowed them to do in like some of the guard tackle counter game, which is where you have linemen pulling around and being lead blockers for the running backs if they're on the left-hand side, they'll pull over to the right and become a lead blocker for your running back in the backfield. When your play side lineman can, blow guys off the line, it makes that path to get out in the open field for the lineman so much easier. So a huge week for these defensive tackles to reestablish the line of scrimmage and not allow them to just kind of impose their will on TCU from a rushing standpoint. So force KJ Jefferson to throw the football. And if he beats you that way, then I think you live with it. But don't allow them to just stay in that mode of, hey, we can get downhill and we can kind of do what we want offensively, and we're just going to stick with it for as long as possible. Secondly, the offense just needs to be more consistent. From a receiver standpoint, Savion Williams had an effective night against Long Island, and then you could kind of see once that game started to get out of hand and it was really clearly in TCU's favor, they said, all right, let's make sure Savion's healthy and good to go next week, and they got him off the field. Eric McAllister made a few catches. Jack Besh has been kind of the unexpected and unsung hero of this offense so far. J.P. Richardson doing his thing. I'm concerned about the offense going into lulls this week. And you see this with air raid teams in general or teams that run tempo, but I think especially in the Kendall Briles era, one issue TCU's run into is, when you're going fast, if you're not moving the chains and those 3 and outs are happening really quickly and you're continuing to put your defense on the field. And defensively, this is a ball game where you got to try your best to force punts because UCF wants to control the clock. And time of possession nowadays, it's not a stat that matters as much just across the board, but I think there's specific teams and matchups where it does make a difference. And I would say this UCF game falls in that category. And the Knights want to shorten this football game, especially with the new clock rules of, clock stopping on first downs. So you got to find a way to keep drives alive. having some issues with my mic, so pivoting here. Sorry. But so far in the passing game, it's been very RPO heavy. There's also been a lot of quick game stuff, which we've talked about. And so in some ways, they haven't really given him a ton of opportunities to make dangerous throws. He's done a really good job of taking what the defense has given him. But as the schedule gets harder and gets tougher and you face better opponents, you would think there's going to be more of an emphasis, on, all right, let's make sure that we're stretching the field, at least giving our receivers opportunities to make plays down the field. And honestly, I mean, there haven't been a lot of attempts yet, but when they've tried, they've had success with it. So we'll see if that continues this week. But the offense, just overall, they need to be consistent. And finally, we'll hit all three phases here. And I'll say, special teams is going to be a big part of this too. UCF has a lot of speed, and so they'll use that in their special teams game. Now, they've had some punt returns and kick returns that have gone for long gains in a flip field position for the first couple games of the year. I think part of that is the competition level. What I'm really more concerned about in a close football game, and I actually didn't think about it too much until I was asked on the Sons of UCF live show tonight, hey, if this comes down to like a kick late in the ball game, what's TCU's kicking situation like? And let me be clear about this. I think Kyle Limmerman was a good pickup by this coaching staff on the recruiting trail. I feel like he's going to end up being a very productive and very good kicker for TCU. You can tell I think there's some freshman jitters right now, just trying to get accustomed to, life in the Big 12 and playing on the big stage. He's missed a couple. So if it's a long field goal attempt at the end of the game, you just hope that he's in a good mental space and he can go through, his normal routine and knock it down. But punt return, kick return game, don't give a team that already is really trying to make a point to run the football, don't give them good field position. Force them to go the length of the field. One thing I haven't mentioned this week that was a lot better in that Long Island game, TCU did a much better job of eliminating those focus penalties and really penalties in general. But honestly, the first 2 weeks of the season, one thing that's been encouraging, a lot less, false starts, holding calls, those preventable things, those unforced errors that can really hurt your football team. They've done a better job of getting rid of that early on in this season. When we come back, I want to talk about one more sort of key to this game, and then I'll get into a prediction. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. First, we need to talk about a couple of our great sponsors. eBay Motors. If you need a part for your vehicle, I've told you before, anytime I mention eBay Motors, you can't mess around with your car. It gets you where you have to go. There are a few things that are more frustrating and will really just throw your logistics brain for a loop than your car breaking down and wondering, man, how am I going to get to this appointment? What am I going to do for work the next couple of days? It can be a nightmare. So you have to keep your car running at peak performance. And whether that's your goal or it's just, leveling it up and adding some details to it that could really make it go to the next level, eBay Motors is the place. They have the Guaranteed Fit program, which is fantastic. You put the make and model of your car on the website. You find the part you think you need, put it in the shopping cart, and it'll give you a green check mark if that's the right part for your car. So you don't have to wonder, man, am I going to get this part and it doesn't work? No, they will tell you if it's the right part for your vehicle. eBay Motors, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. We talk a lot about recruiting on this show. Talent acquisition is one of the most important things in building a college football team. It's no different when we talk about building your business. If you own a small business, you're probably doing a million different things. And one tough thing can be finding people that fit the culture of your job and also can keep the productivity at a high level. That's why you need to post your job openings on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the number one place where people are looking for work. 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other job sites. So you need to use LinkedIn because you can cast a wide net, and they have screening questions and other tools that allow you to narrow down your search so you're not sifting through and wading through application after application, resume after resume. You can narrow it down and find the people you need. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Another sort of key that I feel like is going to be imperative in this football game because of the matchup specifically with what UCF wants to do is, can you take the lead early? Can you get off to a good start? And I don't have a great explanation for this. I think it falls on Sonny and the coaching staff. But one frustrating thing about really even going back to 2022, because there were ball games where the first half was kind of an adventure. But especially last year and then early on this year, TCU just struggles to get off to good starts, right? Like I don't know, it's almost like a feeling out process, and they can't just immediately hit the ground running. The Stanford first half had a turnover on downs, had a turnover, right? 2 turnovers, I guess. One in the red zone, one in your part of the field that set up a score. And you go into halftime down by 7 points. Long Island, you kind of got helped out by a botched punt, but the first quarter was not super smooth or crisp, and they kind of settled in. When you're playing UCF, though, with their ability to run the ball and with their desire to run the ball and to shorten the game, you can't really afford to fall behind in this ball game. Like, this is not the type of matchup where you want to fall behind by 2 scores early. Because if you do, that plays right into what Gus Malzahn and this UCF team want. So, I mean, Captain Obvious, like every week, it's important to get off to a good start. Coaches in an ideal world, they want their team to play 4 quarters of football, just a solid 4 quarters of football. That rarely happens for a number of different reasons, but TCU seems to really struggle to start ball games. And this is not the type of game where I think you can afford to fall behind. So I want the Frogs to get out to an early lead. Okay, prediction-wise, again, as I said, this line, essentially a pick 'em ball game. I think UCF's talented. I said that multiple times this week, especially at the skill positions. I feel like the teams are very similar. Ultimately, a few things that have me optimistic about a TCU win, and I'm picking the Frogs to win this game. I do think this defense is just better. And I'm not predicting that they're going to completely shut down UCF or shut them out. But I believe they're going to do a good enough job against this running game to force them into some tough situations where they have to throw, and that should help them get off the field. And then offensively, I believe this is the week where things really start to click. And I like what Josh Hoover's been doing. It hasn't been spectacular from like a, oh man, look at this throw that he's making each and every week. But he's just handled his business and gone about it in the right way. I also think being home is going to make a difference. I expect a really good atmosphere. It's a night game. And UCF is 2-9 in their last 11 matchups against Power 5 opponents. They had a rough year last year. Now, they were competitive in a lot of these ball games in the Big 12, but it was still an adjustment, and they struggled to close games. And they went and revamped this offense and got it done. But, man, I believe in TCU and just their ability to get it done on Saturday. I think they win and move to 3-0, and if you can do that, then you're talking about a chance, if you can beat SMU, to go 4-0, roll into that Kansas game. But we'll use the old cliche that we're taking it one game at a time. When we come back, we'll get some audience reaction and wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If your house is anything like mine, the hours of like 5 to 7 p.m. are just insane. My wife's an amazing cook, and she's trying to make these really good meals for my kids, and they're just all over the house. And it's hard to get everybody to sit down at the table and eat, and then all that's over, and you're like, man, have I eaten anything? And it's late at night, and you're like, gosh, what am I going to eat that's not going to make me feel horrible, and also that's going to tie me over, at the end of the night. And I want you to look into Factor meals. No prep, no mess. 35 different meals, 60 add-ons to choose from. You can crush your wellness goals with their nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature all kinds of great ingredients. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and then use the code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first month. So half off your first month and then 20% off the next month. Again, that code is LockedOnCollege50. LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first month and then 20% off your next month. Factor Meals, if you're, debating that age-old question, what's for dinner? Look no further. Factor Meals, factormeals.com, LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box. So don't forget, I want to see your predictions in the YouTube comments, TCU fans. Also, UCF fans, because UCF fans have found my YouTube channel this week, which is awesome. I've enjoyed interacting with you. Audience reaction wise, so T Jones had a really long thought about how one-dimensional TCU's offense has been so far. He said about 80% of what they've done has been on the arm of Josh Hoover, which I meant to go back and look today to check that math. But yeah, they've struggled to run the ball. They struggled to run the ball against LIU. I think they'll be more balanced this week. And the other thing I would say is UCF's also very one-dimensional. Now, I feel like part of that is because of the people they've been playing. They just feel like they can run the ball on them, and they didn't need to really show a lot on film. But I want to force KJ Jefferson to throw the football. And again, he might beat you that way, but make him do it, because the way they run the ball with these running backs, and then him having an option as well, is pretty crazy. A couple of UCF fans mentioned my snafu yesterday of calling them the Golden Knights. Yes, I've learned it's just the Knights. Okay, duly noted. That change was made. Steven Suarez said, I would love to see TCU try some runs to the corners. We see so many runs right up the middle. We need to spread it out a little. Funny thing is, I feel like Cam Cook has bounced it outside a little too often. If you can follow his blockers, you could get some tough yards like in the interior. But yeah, we might see some more jet sweeps, some more stuff where they're going to the perimeter. We'll get after it and see what they do. So TCU UCF Saturday night should be a good one. I'm picking the Frogs to win. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Post-game show after the game Saturday. That should be fun. We'll be live on YouTube. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. Your team every day. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast.